just a reminder of where we've been coming from. So chapter 4 assigned last week and continuing on to this week. It's a very good chapter. I mean, I like the history of media, but this is about media as it's programmed today, so that's good. This is one of the weeks or a couple of weeks where we actually touch on the content of the media in some ways anyway, which we don't always do. So remember, by talking about programming, what we're talking about is what kind of content gets on the air or into a streaming service. There are a lot of reasons that it winds up there. A lot, it's really the interaction between the audience and the programmers. One of the ways that the industry has developed to get a sense of that is ratings. So the rating service right now, Nielsen is by far the #1 rating service in the United States, does television. About a decade ago bought Arbitron, which used to do radio, so now Nielsen does radio as well. We looked at one of their publications, which gave you a sense just of what kinds of marketing information and research are made available to radio stations about their audience, offered up by Nielsen. And so those kinds of data and marketing information would be available to any commercial radio station that paid a monthly subscription fee to get that kind of information from Nielsen, and in return they're also rated by Nielsen, which means we have a whole week about the ratings service systems, how those actually work. But it's really essential if you're a commercial station, radio or television, to be in the ratings, and you actually have to subscribe and pay a monthly fee in order to be rated. In exchange, not only do you get into the ratings game, but you also get information about your audience and what they're listening to and stuff like that. So as we saw, the content is what draws particular segments of an audience, or we talk about target audiences, right? So different types of content target different types of audiences, and stations know that, and they make that known to advertisers. So for instance, if you're selling golf clubs, you will think, well, who wants to buy my golf clubs? People of a certain age probably. And so you will then go looking for radio or television outlets which target the people who are likely to buy your golf clubs. In return, if your business is choosing content which is going to go and attract those folks, you need to know what they listen to, what they respond to, and then you need to buy or produce the material that they're going to come and get. So a lot of the content that we, of course, as consumers, we take it for information or for entertainment. We're less aware or concerned by how we're actually a commodity. We're actually something sold to advertisers by television stations. But we get used to the type of content that we'll later on seek out. So, if we look at early radio programming, which we did last week, and we don't want to spend too much time on it, but we're just kind of jumping back into the, this topic, for instance, soap operas. So what would be their target audience, do you think?
Women.
Women, right? Women who, well, at the time, I don't think women had so many options as to whether they, worked out of the home or stayed in the home, but they would certainly, the producers of soap operas would be well aware that they had an audience at home, bored, stuck there, looking for entertainment. And so we get, one of these really established program types soap operas, which came up in the 40s on radio, but made the transition over to broadcast TV. And, now things are changing, of course, where streaming services are switching up the whole logic of the industry, but it's still important, and so on and so forth. So you pretty much these program types persisted and were developed because they consistently brought in target audiences. When television came in the late 40s, early 50s, and became the next big electronic medium, as we said, a lot of the personalities, the celebrity stars, even the shows, the types of shows, they all moved over into television and left radio a little bit kind of like searching for a new purpose, something that they could do consistently, and they found music, and they started to do what's called formats. And so starting in the 1970s, radio stations which prior to that had played a whole variety of content. They could play a country music show, a classical music show, have some situation comedies. They eventually just stabilized on playing particular types of music. And as we saw, these are just a few of over 50 formats which are recognized in FM radio programming. And there's no office of central format creation. Formats are created in the industry, sometimes by consultants who promise stations, hey, I can get you better audience. We're going to try this new thing, this different mix of music and such. And those that are successful at gathering an audience, they will persist, So we looked at the research that Nielsen makes available to us for free just to see, that these are still the top two formats in radio. Country. There are more country stations in the United States than any other format. And in every market, your top station, or maybe your second highest, the station with the second largest audience will be like a big news talk station, because everyone tunes in during the drive and stuff. So, as we said, each of these formats draws a different audience. You can imagine, who do you think would listen to classic hits? How old would those people be?
50, 60?
Yeah, right. That's very good. That's exactly how old they are. So they're actually the same people that watch CBS. And so, mid-50s would be, classic hits, classic rock. That type of music is programmed out of the 60s and 70s, and that's when those people would be young, myself included. And so, we would be a target audience for that, versus urban contemporary, or what they call rhythmic contemporary, which are, just, slightly different mixes of R&B, soul, and hip hop, with a different balance depending on how old you're looking for. So, here in the Bay Area, these might be KYLD, KMEL, and KISQ, for instance. And these were all stations owned by iHeartRadio. They all would be classified under urban contemporary, rhythmic contemporary, and you can see kind of as I go up the list there, these would be for your 20-somethings, these would be for your 30-somethings, this station probably for your 40 and above. So sometimes you can see a pretty clear strategy based on, again, on segmenting an audience, using the music to draw the audience to that particular station, and then they can sell that as a kind of a unique, hey, we've got you, you're 20-something party people, so advertise with us, and it'd be very different advertising than for 40 and above, So that's how programming kind of works out in radio currently, music radio. And as we can see, these other categories of talk are very successful. And the music side of the business, as you can guess, is worried about Spotify and other forms of music delivery, which are not formatted so much. You can take a more personal route through them. And we'll look at those business propositions later on too. So, and then we just briefly went through, where radio programs nowadays come from. There's a lot of local programming, so those three stations over there, they decide what music they play. They're free to make their mix whatever they want. There's also a source of programming coming out of network or syndicated programs. So there are news networks that spread out national news stories to all the network stations like CBS Radio News. There's syndicated programs which are produced privately and then sold on a market-by-market basis. So we said Rush Limbaugh or some of these, right and left-wing ranters are typically syndicated programs, as is, Ryan Seacrest and his, Top 40. Hey, Miko. So this is a hot clock. As we said, this represents an hour of programming, and we drop in particular music selections where it says music, and then there's traffic, commercials, promotions, and stuff. So this, every station will be using what's these called hot clocks. And they basically guarantee, they're a strategy. They figure, well, the audience will be in their car, let's give them some music, then we'll hit them with commercials, then we'll do a promo, then we're back into music. And so the hot clock is designed to maximize audience in the hour that it covers. So we talked about that in more depth, right? Okay, so then we're getting into TV programs, which you said they originated largely coming out of, wow, there were soap operas on radio, it worked, so let's do soap operas on TV and comedies and stuff. And a lot of the original successful shows made the jump into television. And we looked at, just a few examples, but there's tons of those up on YouTube, the 50s in television, the 60s on television, the 70s on television and stuff, And so here's a nice list again of, variety shows were on radio. Then, there's the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, which was a huge variety show in the late 50s and early 60s. And, have we seen any variety shows recently? You guys don't watch a lot of TV. It's always kind of, right? You guys watch video in many other formats, but not necessarily TV. But I think Maya Rudolph has tried, so she's might have seen her on the Emmys last night, a pretty boring show, but she's a Saturday Night Live celebrity star, kind of, and she can sing, she can do comedy, amazing. She's she's all-rounder, and so they tried a couple of times to put her on a variety show, produced by Lorne Michaels, who does Saturday Night Live and stuff, who's like an empire. Doesn't seem to have clicked yet. And then some of those late night shows, where are they? Late night talk, right? So they verge on reality sometimes. They'll do sort of musical numbers or fool around. They'll do comedy and stuff. And so there's still stuff there. As we've seen, we said before, one of the program types that still brings a big live audience is sports, just because people want to see that. So that see that as it happens. And so it's an increasing challenge to broadcasting, which is a synchronous medium, right? You consume it as it happens, to compete with streaming, which is asynchronous. You get to watch a show whenever you want, right? And so they're always on the lookout for things like sports, which capture a big audience, or reality shows, which also, on the final episode, the final reveal, people will tune in large numbers still to, the important moments in reality show programming, at least competition reality shows. Yeah?
I have a question. Is there a term for when something is both asynchronous and synchronous? Because there's a show I watch every Sunday that it's live when you're watching it, when they're premiering it, but then HBO Now or HBO Go has it on to stream.
Yeah, there's no real term for that because the industry doesn't really care about synchronous or asynchronous.
Okay.
It's really us wonky. We got to categorize everything, right? So the industry itself knows that they'll broadcast something on Tuesday night, and then it'll be on their website, and then it'll be forever in their streaming catalog, and in some ways broadcast is now becoming like a loss leader. You put it out there, you don't worry too much if only 5 million people see it, because what you want is 10 years from now to have control of that in your huge streaming catalog to keep on profiting from it. So it used to be far more important, the live synchronous viewing, but now it's counted in. We'll see when we talk about ratings more. Types of TV programs, there's all kinds of stuff. Today we're going to work on primetime programming. This talks a little bit about how stuff is done here. Sorry, Chow, what's that?
You said primetime access rule?
Prime time access rule, right? Yeah, I just want to see what's coming up here. Who carries what? Okay, we'll move quickly through these, and then we'll get to our we need to give ourselves time to do stuff. So again, following on from this stuff, it's you know, more enumeration of program types. So in the news area, you've got your 24/7 cable news, which came up in the 1980s, and of course now is very profitable. Fox is generally the number one there, and as you know, they're quite ideologically, you know, segmented. So if you want to reach a conservative audience, go to Fox. If you want to reach a liberal audience, go to MSNBC. You know. At the same time, you know, you got your evening news on a national level, but local newscasts are actually very profitable. Again, they still capture really old audiences, people in their late mid-50s or something, would be the typical viewer of any of these, actually. Young people are getting their news other ways. But the local newscast is a big money maker for the local station itself because they don't share advertising revenue with the network. They produce it, so they keep 100% of the proceeds of commercials during the local news, whether it be at 6 p.m. or at 10 p.m. or at 11 or whenever they show it. They get all the advertising money. So they invest. By far the most people at the television station are employed doing news, but they make more money out of that than anything else. And we do have, like, coming up in weeks from now, we talk more about the news business and how the news is produced and created for TV. And children's shows, I mean, I don't know. Did you guys watch SpongeBob when you were growing up? Am I hitting, like, sort of the right demo? Still watch SpongeBob? Yeah. Okay. Kukla, Fren, and Ollie was kind of a joke when I was a kid, but that was on. Sesame Street, there you go. I grew up with that, that's for sure. And in fact, I knew people who produced segments for it later on, because that's one of the early international shows. There'd be like a Sesame Street in, you know, Holland. There was a Sesame Street in Canada. There's one, of course, in the United States, which was the parental organization. So if you lived in another country, you could, you know, produce segments for Sesame Street. So it was a show format that was sold everywhere. Nowadays, it's reality shows that are sold like that. Like, there's a huge Dutch company called Endemol, which produces reality shows in Holland, but they sell the ideas across the world, you know. So, what was it? You know, you could look them up on Wikipedia, and you'll be amazed at how many American reality shows that you've heard of were actually created by Endemol and sold to Hollywood producers who remade them, sometimes literally, like what's the one with the $65,000 question or something? No, what is it? The one with the one with Regis, which had the set and everything. No, pardon me.
Wants to be a millionaire?
Yes, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? I think that's an Endemol concept, but they literally designed the set. Like, you go from one country to another, the set is the same. There's Slumdog Millionaire. Have anyone seen that film? So there's a movie produced about the Indian version of it, a fictional film, a really fun, entertaining movie. Anyhow, you'll see there, the set's exactly the same as the American one, because that's all part of the package that you buy. So those tend to circulate globally too now. But, you know, I mean, anybody seen this crazy show on Netflix where there's like, it's kind of like a reality competition show where people are doing all these kind of feats?
That's the one that's taken out from American Ninja Warrior, kind of. But it's American Beastmaster or something.
Something like that. I don't know. I don't know the title of it, but my 8-year-old watches it, and so they do all kinds of crazy things, like, you know, jump across this and grab this and climb the wall before all the pegs fall out and everything. All right, but they have like boxes full of hosts, like English-speaking hosts from America, British hosts, French hosts, German hosts, and so on and so forth. So they have like maybe up to about 10 different pairs of hosts who, you know, do the broadcast in their own language, because Netflix is a global company, right? It has billions of subscribers, maybe, or hundreds of millions of subscribers across the world. And so they do a Netflix original, and I thought that was really an interesting twist on it, is that, you know, they integrate into the show all these different hosts who speak in different, languages for their own market, and you can pick, whichever one you actually want to follow. So I thought that was interesting. We'll probably see more of that, as the global distribution changes what we see on TV. Anyway, so here we go. In terms of entertainment programming, television is being produced on this crazy way of working. You've probably all heard of pilots, I bet. Even if you watch less and less TV. Whoa, look at me! I got like. Typically the way things would work would be a network would send out an order. In other words, they say, we need more sitcoms. The Big Bang Theory is about to go off the air. And, that was great for us. Every Wednesday night for the last 10 years, we've been doing well. We need another one. And so they put the word out, and the studios, which hire the creative people, will say, oh, CBS wants another sitcom, or actually, they get an order for 10 different things. And eventually, they come out with treatment, which is basically, okay, it will be about this group of college kids doing this zany thing, and they'll have these different characters. And if the studio, if the broadcaster likes it, they'll produce pilots. So there's a pilot season, early winter into spring, where literally hundreds of pilots are created. And then the network takes a look at the pilots, or all the networks look at the pilots, decide, which 10 they think are their first choice and which 10 are the second choice. And they'll make an order, usually 6 or 8 episodes, and they'll start. They roll it out in fall, typically in September, and they see within 2-3 weeks, if it doesn't have an audience, they cancel it, and they put up, one of the 10 that they chose in their second round of choices. And so that's typically the way it goes. And so working creatively in television has always been on this crazy rhythm where, you knew that starting in January through April, you would be insanely needed because they're producing 200 pilots. And then things would go dark during the summer, and then you'd be hanging on for dear life, hoping that your show would get picked up in the fall. And if those 6 or 8 episodes you didn't get canceled, you'd be like insanely busy writing for, from October through to the winter, because you only had 6 or 8 episodes in the can, and then now they want the rest, So maybe there might be a week or two in October or November where they do a rerun or two, but then you have to feed the beast, until the ratings say nobody's watching this, and then it gets canceled. So that's typically the way it is, and people have for a long time decried, what a waste that is, because you're producing hundreds of pilot shows, most of which will never get picked up. So you do 200 pilots, maybe 60 of them get a shot, 40 of those will be canceled in the first 3 weeks or something. The 20 shows that survive, now we'll see. Will they last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? So it's incredibly expensive and wasteful. So they've been thinking about different ways of restructuring that. And sometimes they'll do what's called straight to order, which means if you're a very famous producer, like Ryan Murphy or something, that they may just say, okay, do the show, do the 20 episodes for us, and then we'll cancel it after that if we don't like it, if they have a sure bet. Whoa, and then there's, in television syndication, so remember syndicators, they are private companies that produce shows, and then they sell them to local stations all over the place. And so these, like Dr. Phil is a first, what's called a first run syndicated show. A lot of kind of daytime talky type shows for television are produced by syndicators. But they also do something called off network, and this is what we commonly call reruns. And so up until streaming became a big thing a few years ago, your sitcom or your drama produced for a network would only have an additional life on late at night in reruns or on the weekend or something like that. And typically syndicators, these companies, they would, buy the rights to Frasier or Seinfeld. They go buy the rights, and then they would sell market by market to the local stations, those shows. And that was how the reruns business worked, and it was incredibly lucrative. Like apparently Seinfeld episodes are still worth about $1 million per episode. And this is all these years later. So incredibly valuable, some of those very successful network shows. So it starts on a network and then it goes into reruns. They call that off network because it originated on a network and then it went off the network into reruns. Versus a first run show like Dr. Phil or something like that, a network never produced it. It was always produced by a syndicator. So that's the difference between those shows, which is, it's a big deal financially. Maybe not when you watch it, you could care less who produced it, but financially it's a huge deal, the differences. And then, the last few things, cable companies. So, when cable is now, a lot of what we want to watch is produced by cable companies like FX or something like that, which has its position on, a cable channel lineup. They can be in a higher tier so that cable subscribers have to pay a little more to get access to that type of call it a network. So those can be, very big, very financially successful, or you can have, your local access, public access channels, which still exist out there, which the cable network the cable provider has to pay for that in order for you to see that. Anybody done any local cable stuff? No? Okay. That's actually how I, after school, broadcast, school, learned to do stuff. And I was like, well, where do you get a job? Local cable access type of thing. You just go there and start working for a year or two, and you learn your craft, and you meet a lot of people, and then sooner or later they get jobs, and they tell you, oh yeah, this guy, we worked with him, he's okay, and then you get in that way, and it can still work that way. So it's sometimes a good step. Alrighty, so let's get into how things look from the standpoint of networks. So there's the big three networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and of course we have to add Fox to that as well. CBS, NBC, Fox, and if we look at, into Spanish language, there's going to be Univision. Of a size that can compete with these guys. And they produce a lot of network programming, sitcoms, dramas, procedurals, all the stuff that we were talking about. And the big area of competition is prime time, because that's when the advertising rates are the most expensive. Non-prime time, there's less money poured into programming, and good parts of the daytime schedule are left to the local stations. But prime time is controlled by the TV industry. And in fact, it was so dominated by the networks that Congress actually had to make a rule to allow local stations to program their own between 7 and 8, because otherwise the networks were even taking over all of that. So, prime time is typically 8 to 11 p.m., with 7 to 8 is called prime access. Now, the local station can designate to turn that over to the network if they feel like it. It may be more profitable for them to do it, or they might put their local news. But then 8 to 11 is prime time proper. But those of you who may have watched Fox know that Fox cuts out at 10 p.m. Because it was a better deal for their local affiliates to do that. So prime time is somewhere between 8 and to 11, or maybe 8 to 10 if you're Fox, 7 days a week. So there's competition in prime time, and there are different strategies that the networks use to compete with each other. So when we say compete, we're talking about the competition for ratings, for people to tune in and watch your show. And that determines couple of things. Number one, as we said, that determines, will the show itself be canceled? If people don't tune in and watch these shows, eventually the ratings will be bad and they may be canceled within a couple of weeks, really, nowadays, which is not something you want to have happen to your show, because you're hoping it'll be on for 10 years and that you'll be get $1 million per episode. But the other thing that happens over prime time as these networks compete with one another is that they compete for the advertiser's dollar. In prime time, they are showing, the shows vary little, and so there's a lot of competition there. The prices are highest. So we're going to look at some strategies that the networks use in order to compete with one another. My data sheet is pretty old, but we're first going to learn some terms that are used in the industry to describe these strategies, and then we're going to look at the examples. And so my examples, I'm sorry, are from 2012. I really got to go back and get some new ones. You probably recognize some of the shows anyway. So what we're talking about is how the networks try to get audience, given that they're competing against each other. Let's take Univision off here, just not because it's not important or something, but just because they've got the Spanish language audience pretty much sewn up versus the 4 English language networks. They're the ones that are competing against each other in prime time. So if you look at my little data sheet here, and we'll look at it in more detail, I'll ask you to do a little analysis of it. But looking at my data sheet, you can see it's got ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox arrayed across the top. And there's actually 2 different weeks on this sheet. This one is the week starting May 14th, and this one is starting in September. So this would have a new season, and this would have the spring season, which is a continuation. So, but what we're looking at there is basically on what's on ABC starting at, it goes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and each, you'll see on the left side, it starts at 8, I believe, and goes, the last number there is 10:30. So it covers 8 to 11 each day and each network. So what we can do is compare, okay, ABC was fighting against CBS, NBC, and Fox. What did ABC put up there that they thought would attract the audience that's tuning into television that night? And then we can look at the different strategies that they have to compete against one another. So basically, they're all fighting for the most expensive audience that exists in media today, which is, the primetime television watching audience. Still today, it's the same thing. So this costs advertisers more than anything else, more than any other type of media. This is the most expensive thing that an advertiser can go buy. They're trying to buy audience during prime time. So if you're at ABC, of course you want them to spend money with you on, and you put up shows that you think will attract a big audience, all right? So let's look now at, on the other side of the page, the key strategies of TV programming. How these networks try to position shows to compete against the other networks. So there are, there's a bunch of terminology here, and we'll try to explain what they are. And number one is temp polling. So this temp polling refers to a situation where, let's say you're an ABC programmer, and you've got a show at 8 p.m., which let's say it reaches 5% of your audience. And then you've got a show at 8:30, which is a big hit. It's a big success, and it reaches 8% of your audience. And then at 9 o'clock, you got another show which is really not doing too well. It's only reaching 4% of your audience, right? So this would be 8, 8:30, 9. And so we could draw a little picture like this. And so it looks like the show at 8:30, which has really high ratings, is a tent pole. It's holding up a tent, right? So on this side, you've got a lesser performing show. On this side, a lesser performing show. But in the middle, you've got a really popular show that's holding everything up. So they call this tent polling. And you'll often hear people, you know, in media, they'll talk about, well, this is a tent pole show. You know, what they mean is this is a really popular show that can prop up all the other shows around it. Okay? So if I drew a picture like this, which is kind of the opposite, this is hammocking. So what do you think hammocking? So this is tent polling. As you can see, the strong show is holding up. Now what's this? This is hammocking. So there's a show number 1, a show number 2, a show number 3. Which shows do you think are doing better?
1 and 3.
1 and 3, exactly. So hammocking is when you've got 2 highly rated shows holding up, you know, something in between them. So often when a network is starting out a new show, like let's say a new sitcom where you don't know the actors or anything, and they'll put it between 2 well-known, well-performing shows, and they're hoping that people who start off watching the first show will stick around through the second show and give it a try and see what it looks like, and then they'll enjoy the third show, right? So this is the idea that what you're always trying to do is you're using your strengths to prop up the ratings for your other shows. So that's hammocking, right? Now, next one is called leading in. So let's say, again, we're looking at an evening that starts at 8 o'clock. That's when your prime time starts. So leading in is really simple. It's the idea that you should lead with your show that has a really good audience. You get people who, you know, people are sitting in getting ready to watch an evening of television around 8 o'clock. You get them tuning in to your big reality show. And then later on, whatever follows, hopefully they won't change the channel, right? Leading out, similar type of idea. So a poorly rated program is scheduled after a popular show with the hope that the audience will stay tuned to the same channel. So this is the idea that, let's say, at 8 o'clock, we're not doing too well with this new show, but we have a real solid performer at 9. So people are going to start tuning in to the 9 p.m. show at 8:45, 8:55, 8, you know. So look at that. You know, the way the ratings are taken, they're taken in these chunks. And so if people are getting ready to watch the 9 o'clock show, they'll tune in to the end of the 8 o'clock show, which will necessarily bring up the ratings. And so leading out is you know, it's kind of a trick, but it's also real. You may tune in at the end of a show and say, it looks like a pretty good show. Maybe I'll try tuning in a little earlier. So that's leading out, where you have a high-performing show and you put a lower performer in front. So you could call leading out could also be part of hammocking, right? If you just look at hammocking in this way, you've got a low-performing show moving up to a higher-performing show too, okay? So we got a few more. Bridging. A program is slotted to go over the starting time of a show on a competing network. For example, the season finale of a reality show could be scheduled from 8 to 9:30 p.m. to compete with another network's reality show that is scheduled to start at 9. Okay? So far we've been talking about, you know, the first 4, it's all within one network. They're just trying to maximize what they've got. But now we're talking about 2 networks fighting against each other. So let's say ABC runs a show, like we said, from 8 to 9:30, and thereby if CBS starts their show at 9, you know, you're hoping that people will stay with you and not switch over to the other network. So that's bridging. Bridging, where you kind of make your show last over a transition that you're afraid that the audience is going to make. So that's bridging. You know, you just keep them with you so long that they miss the beginning of the other network show. Blocking. A network schedules a succession of similar programs over a block of time. For example, 4 half-hour situation comedies scheduled over 2 hours. So are you guys, again, in as much as you still watch network TV, are you aware of any program blocks? What that means is on a particular night, let's say on a Sunday night, you might have 4 shows of the same type programmed one after the other. So any ideas about blocks, program blocks? Yeah?
Doesn't Fox have a animation block?
Right, so that's a big one. Fox's Sunday animation, so you know, it would be The Simpsons and so on and so forth. They've been doing it for decades. There was these, you know, must-see TV. I mean, NBC had a Thursday night situation comedy lineup in the 90s, which was dominant for, again, for close to a decade. So this is blocking, which is a succession of shows, like at 8, at 8:30, at 9, at 9:30, you know, which would get you all the way to 10 o'clock with shows of the same type. So you just settle in and watch all the same type of shows. And then last concept, counter programming or head-to-head programming. So we're back to the competition between networks. So this is where ABC is doing a big competition reality show, a singing show, let's say, and CBS can do either two things. They could decide, okay, ABC, they're going to do their big singing show. Let's put on sports so that everyone, you know, we know that the people who want to watch sports, they don't want to watch a reality show, and vice versa. So that's called counter programming. So it's like you look at what the competition is doing and you do something counter, something different. And that way you say, okay, well, they'll get all the people who like sports, we'll get all the reality show people, or we'll get all the crime drama audience, and they'll get the comedies, you know. So that's counter programming. But then there's also head-to-head programming, which is where you look at ABC and you say, oh, they've got a singing reality show on. Let's see if we can kill them with our singing reality show. We're going to go head-to-head at the same time and see if we can steal away their audience. You know? And so that's head-to-head programming. And they would do that because the networks are in competition not just hour to hour to get the most viewers, but also on a given night. They want to say, we rule Thursday night. Nobody really wants Friday and Saturday because the audience is small because people go out and do other things. But midweek nights, they want to rule those nights. And they also want to say, we're the #1 network in America overall, which CBS has been doing for a while. And so, you know, it would be, for instance, in the interest of CBS to say, ABC, they're getting close to us because they got that hit singing reality show. Let us make something which will steal away part of their audience. And even if we both wind up doing kind of okay, in the grand scheme of things, we're hurting ABC. And so it's good for CBS. So they might do that type of thing, which would make more sense out of head-to-head programming. The other thing is just sometimes if there's 2 sporting events on and both people happen to have them, they'll both do pretty well because a lot of you know, big audience still tunes into sporting events. So if there's enough audience for everybody, great. You know, go ahead and do head-to-head programming. So there's a bunch of reasons for it. So this is, you know, there's a few up here that I didn't put on the list. Stunting, that's where your show does something crazy just to get attention. So they'll bring on a big guest star, or they'll have a musical episode of, you know, Grey's Anatomy or some kind of doctor show. They'll do something weird, okay, just to get attention. Stripping is something that's done with syndicated shows. So that would be like every night of the week at 11 o'clock, there will be an episode of, you know, Big Bang Theory or something, a rerun, but, you know, 5 nights a week. So that they call that stripping. Okay, anyhow, so let's stick to what's on the paper. And so now what we want to do is flip over and look at our data sheet. And we want to try to come up with examples of some of the biggies that we talked about. So particularly, why don't we look for temp pulling and hammocking. So I think there's one more thing I have to fill you in about, which is there are numbers here. So what we're doing is comparing numbers. If you look again, pardon me? Oh, okay. Okay, they have links to it at home, but okay, but let's do that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks, Jody. Let's put it on the document scanner too. And boom. The image mate. Come on, image mate. So you'll see numbers on it. A document camera is not connected because I didn't tell. Boom, boom, boom. There we are. So looking at ABC over here on the left, you can see 11.97. That was sort of the total average audience that ABC had that night. Dancing with the Stars, big reality show, got 15.79% of the audience. After which Bachelorette got 8.05. So this is how to interpret the numbers that we're seeing, basically. We were interested in these specific numbers for the shows, not so much for, well, what this tells us is that ABC won the night, I believe, with the highest average. But what we want to look at is the actual shows. Yeah?
Sorry, I think I might have missed what you said when you said the 15%. Does that mean
So 15.79, it means you've got 15.79% of the audience
of the
that
total
night.
viewers that night?
Is this? I would think so, but I'm not. For our purposes, I'm not sure if this is share or rating, but it doesn't really matter, because everyone is we're comparing the same thing. So yeah, call it. It's probably share, but we'll see. Yeah, yeah, Ibu.
So with DVRs and recording devices, do they register as a view or no?
When we talk about ratings in a few weeks, we will. So it depends. They look at live viewing, so at which point DVRs don't count. But increasingly, they look at live +3 or live +5, which means that they'll count the live view, but also anybody who watched it on a DVR within 3 or 5 days. It depends on the period that they actually define. So, and of course, they're moving more and more to live +3 or live +5 because the live numbers are going down, because people do time, it's called time shifting. Yeah, so in this case, I believe these are live view, and I think they're probably share, but all of those terms we don't really need so much today. But what we're looking at is, so we're looking for maybe some temp pulling, maybe some hammocking, maybe some leading in. So can you guys see any examples of that? For instance, leading in, let's start with that maybe, or I'll take anything I can get from your keen analytic eyes, but let's say leading in is where you start the evening off with a strong performing show and you hope that people stay with you. Do you see any examples of that?
Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars, absolutely, right? Because you're starting off with 15.79, which if you look over the whole sheet, that's just about, you know, okay, NCIS got 19%, but that's just about the highest number on there. So yeah, definitely kicking off the evening with Dancing with the Stars. That's great. And NCIS leads off Tuesday nights on CBS, right, with a huge number there. And then NCIS Los Angeles comes in and does pretty well too, right? So yeah, so that's a good example of leading in. So our little assignment here says, it says down here, note down the day, time, and networks involved. So you would say Monday 8 p.m. ABC, leading in, right?
Do you write on a paper or on a separate sheet?
Oh yeah, I should give you guys some paper. Right. I used to have a pad that I would. So I do have some. Where is it? How many sheets have I got?
Are we turning it in?
Yeah. Yeah, and then people who are not in the class today can turn it in online. Basically it. So whoops, one sec. Oh.
Hey Malcolm,
Yes.
which is the key strategy for when they just put on garbage programming because everyone else is doing so much better than them that day?
Well, I'd say that's probably, you might call that counter programming in a sense that you just give up. You say, well, they're doing that, I'll do something else. I just basically am going to put on a lot of low performing content.
Okay.
All right. A brief interlude while I tear up pieces of paper. Didn't have a chance to go and buy a pad at the bookstore. So here we go. This will be all right. So meanwhile, why don't you guys also look for some examples, other examples of leading in or temp pulling or hammocking. So if you were looking for temp pulling, you would be looking for a highly rated show between two lower rated shows. So see if you can find anything like that there that they were doing. Here we go. I mean, if you have some paper that you can, if you have paper of your own, oh, goodness me. Who does need one of my tiny little pieces of paper? You got something? Okay. Gordon, you need a paper. All right, you don't need one? Okay, all right. A lot of people are coming to class. One for you, or do you have a notebook? Okay, excellent. All right. Well, I could have asked that before I tore up a lot of paper. So does anyone see any temp pulling?
Law and Order.
Tuesdays out there.
Tuesday, okay.
ABC.
ABC.
Cougar Town at 8:30. Dancing Stars.
So it's on the, I'm on the other week, that's it. Yeah, let me see here, Tuesday.
Yeah, right there.
Cougar Town, Dancing with the Stars. Yeah, so it looks like Dancing with the Stars results is temp polling the other guys, right? Private practice, what was that even? I don't even know. Yeah, so, and that's a good, that's a good indication of what the results night of a reality show can do for you, right? Because 13.23, that's almost as good as the actual competition. So you'd assume, yeah, sure, people want to go and see contestants compete, but just to get the answers or to get the results, they'll come back again. So, yep, that's a great example of temp polling. So again, you write down daytime would be Tuesday, ABC, etc. So that's a good example of temp polling. Excuse me. Now, how about hammocking? Can we see any examples of that? So again, I'm on
ABC Sundays, America's Funniest Home Videos.
ABC Sunday, America's Home Video. Let's see, Sunday, all the way down there. Okay. So, what are we looking for? We're looking for
A dip between two poles.
a dip between two poles, right? But we only have two shows there, right? We've got America's Funniest Home and we've got Billboard Music Awards.
NBC on Wednesday.
NBC on Wednesday, same schedule. Up we go Wednesday. NBC is the third one.
Off the Rockers to Law and Order again.
That looks like a hammock. Yeah. So we're talking about this one.
Yep.
So Wednesday, yep. Ratings are pretty low, but that's kind of predictable for these types of shows. especially on NBC. CBS, you might double that type of thing, but NBC. So Off Your Rockers at 5.52, propping up Law and Order SVU at 2.86. It's a rerun, so people aren't that interested in tuning into a rerun.
The new one comes on after.
The new one comes on after, and that's the draw. So, for networks, sometimes, they could pour money in and create a new show and wind up with a rating of 3.0, and they say, why the hell should we do that? Let's just put on a rerun of our existing popular show, and we'll get close to that without all the expense and effort of creating something different. So you'll see those kinds of back-to-back arrangements where basically they want to take a well-performing show and just kind of expand it. So they can, and they're not going to do much worse than if they, put in all the effort to promote and market a new show that, in their view is just another risk. So this may be one reason why, you're seeing all these shows, that you're like, why is anybody really interested in this? Sometimes it's just, go on. So again, just to digress a touch from the programming strategies or something, but just looking down NBC on Thursday night, at that time, with Community, 30 Rock, Community, what would you call that, putting Community, 30 Rock, Community, back to back? Blocking, right? So that's a great example of blocking there. You got a Thursday night comedy block.
Now, would it also be a head-to-head programming against CBS that same day?
I like it, right? Because CBS is doing The Big Bang Theory. I don't know about the others, but definitely against Big Bang, a rerun of Big Bang, that's head-to-head, right?
Yeah, it's a sitcom too.
Is it? Oh, thank you. I didn't even know. And then Person of Interest, is that like a procedural?
The other two aren't.
Okay.
The other two.
Okay, but definitely in that hour, you're getting, remember we said head-to-head programming was when you're programming similar shows, right? And, both Community and 30 Rock were critical darlings. Like, notice the ratings are low, like around 3.0. They're clearly losing to CBS, which has got an 8.49 and 7.17. But they keep those shows on because, they had that kind of, they had that audience locked up. A smaller niche of people who liked comedy, which was a little brainier, let's say. Community would do these parody episodes and stuff, which you really had to know the kinds of films and shows that they were fooling around with or be interested in the issues that they were dealing with. 30 Rock, the same thing. You had to be, ready to keep up with a really fast-paced, quipping show about broadcasting and stuff versus, Big Bang Theory is a little bit a broader, reach, a broader type of comedy, I guess. Okay, so we got some good examples out there that you could be filling in. So we found some temp pulling, we found some hammocking leading in, and if you want to be super original, and I'm sure you can find other examples. We've seen some blocking. What else could we see? And we saw some head-to-head programming. Any evidence of counter-programming that leaps out at you?
Between ABC's movie Saturday, the same week.
Saturday on the second week?
On the same week.
On the same week, okay. We're looking at Saturday.
Spider-Man 3.
Oh, yeah.
On Fox, it's Saturday baseball then.
Yeah, both rating about the same. So that's a good one. Alex is saying, ABC is showing a movie, a pretty, Spider-Man 3, that's, well, I guess.
At the time, it was a new movie.
It was new enough, I guess. And, maybe I don't think Netflix was even streaming at that point, or wasn't big. Was it 2012? Yeah. You think you could see, maybe you could see something like Spider-Man on Netflix. Anyway, so, but Alex's point is good. Movie, counter programming against baseball. Where is it? Where am I pointing? There it is, baseball. At similar 3.0's ratings as well. Anyone see any other counter programming? Yeah?
The day before it, ABC and CBS, Shark Tank with Undercover Boss.
Yeah, that makes sense. So on Friday, Shark Tank versus Undercover Boss. So you'll see a lot of counter programming out there because, you know, in general, they're trying, you know, to carve out their own little audience instead of competing against, you know, others with blockbusters. Oh, and then down here, I think we already mentioned, so Sunday night on Fox. Yeah, you mentioned the animation lineup. So there it is. So The Simpsons, The Cleveland Show, The Simpsons, new one, and Bob's Burgers, and Family Guy. So what would we call that again?
Blocking.
Blocking, right. So people sometimes get confused between blocking, which means putting a bunch of shows of the same type in a block, versus counter programming, which means, you know, trying to, I'm sorry, not counter programming, head-to-head programming that we talked about, where you are saying, okay, they've got Dancing with the Stars, we're going to put on America's Got Talent, you know, and so that is going head-to-head, similar type of show there against that. So that's another example. And let's see, can we see any examples of leading out? So in leading out, we're looking for a successful established show, which is trying to prop up a show that is performing not quite as well, let's say. And
Fox on the last day.
Fox on the,
You're right there.
we're right here?
Yeah, X Factor to Glee.
Hey, Alex, boy, do you have television network programmers in your family or something? It's excellent, yeah. For a long, when Glee launched, which of course now it's come and gone and such, very successful show, but when it first launched, they put it right after American Idol, because American Idol was their #1 rated show, and Glee, you know, introducing a new show, you wanted to use the leading out effect. So you had a highly rated show and you'd lead out to it. And you see they're still playing that game on Thursday night, although Glee was definitely, it was there in the fall lineup. So here in the spring, it would also, you know, but they're using the X Factor here to lead into Glee because it always worked. And in terms of content, why would you think X Factor would lead well into Glee as well? Because, you know, this is about, because singing, yeah, exactly. So if you enjoy, you know, people covering pop songs, then Glee will deliver that along with, you know, some soapy drama and some campy humor, you know. So that was an early Ryan Murphy success. Who, as we said, Ryan Murphy just moved over to Netflix too, right? But in his network heyday, he could basically say, I have this idea for a series, and they would produce 20 of them right away without even seeing a pilot because he was so successful. Okay, so there's a great example of leading out, you know. That was great. So I think we found some of all of them, and we have about 5 more minutes, so why don't you just sort of polish up what you've got there, and if you can find any other original finds of your own, that would be awesome. You sort of know what we're looking for now. I'll draw those pictures again, right? Temp pulling looks like that, hammocking looks like that, leading in kind of looks like you're going from one show and hoping you'll keep your audience. Oops, sorry. And seriously, if you guys go to websites that discuss, you know, network television, you'll see these terms all the time. You know, their Temp Pull show, they've been leading in on Thursday nights and things like that. They'll use this terminology. And once you know what they're talking about, it's kind of it's visual. It's possible to use it to analyze yourselves. So just clean it up, and when you're done, I'd say we're done for today. And for those who are streaming the class or watching it in archive, in the assignment, this data sheet is out there, and so you would just turn it online. And so those folks who are streaming it can turn it in the next week. The deadline is set like a week from now. I just want to say, if you're interested in this, there's a blog called TV by the Numbers, which was actually started here in San Francisco. I used to see the guys at the Blue Danube Cafe, like basically deciding what they'd be talking about, but they sold out long ago. So I don't know who owns the website, but it's the same. The content of the website is basically the ratings games, So they will go through, and Emmys were on last night, and so they will be telling us, how many people watched. Ooh, now these will all be revised, but 2.2 rating or 11 share. So I guess we were looking at shares. So 11, that wasn't too bad based on 2012 numbers. We were seeing like 14, 15 was pretty good. So of the people that were watching TV last night, 11% of them watched the Emmys. Only 10 million people. So TV by the Numbers is a great source for, day by day, the horse race, what shows are doing well. And they have little features like, they'll be discussing like what'll be the first show canceled and that kind of stuff. And they do, they'll do interviews with creators and executives and stuff. It's a great site if you're interested in TV. All right, so we are at 10:45. So you want to just make sure your name is on this when you turn it in, so I can give you credit for this great in-class activity.
If we didn't get to do all of them, is that okay?
As long as you got some, you could take it and give it to me next time, but it's just people aren't always here, so
Yeah.
give me what you got. How about that? And then if you want to continue it online, just write me a little note at the bottom, say, I'll also, put some more up online if you want. But
97.
yeah, thanks, Gordon.